One of the fun things about building an AI product is that it gives you a free pass to try AI things, right? And that your customers kind of expect that. That's, I think, also why my human BDR gets yelled at a little bit sometimes. It's really easy to get something to work 50% of the time, straightforward for the most part, to get it to work 80% of the time. It's a lot of engineering and a lot of effort to make sure that you've got something that's working in the high 90s. The pace with which everything is moving your PhD could very well be irrelevant by the time you got to the other side, given how long they take.
Welcome to Artificial Insights, the podcast where we learn to build AI businesses by interviewing product leaders and innovators in AI. I'm your host, Daniel Maneri, and today I'm joined by Mike Kirkup, the CTO of Arlo, as well as the CTO of EnPowered. Mike's done numerous things in the startup scene in Waterloo, Canada, such as being the former director of Velocity, the University of Waterloo's world-renowned startup program, and a growth coach at Communitech, an innovation hub in the region. Mike, could you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So my name is Mike Kirkup. I'm the founder of a company called Arlo. This is a spin out from my former company, EnPowered, where I still have a wonderful email and still work closely with the rest of the people there. And what we built or are building is we call it an AI-powered loan processor. So it's hard to imagine in 2025 that such a position exists, but there is a job that a lot of Canadians and Americans do. It comes by various different names, but the most common name is loan processor. And this is a job where they collect documents and ensure that the documents meet all the requirements to be able to submit that to underwriting as part of a commercial loan. They exist for both commercial and non-commercial loans, but we focus on commercial. And the way we found ourselves in this kind of world is actually its own kind of funny backstory. So EnPowered as the company is 10 years old. Its bread and butter business is predicting when electricity is going to be really expensive, and then telling you not to use electricity when it's expensive. And the thing that was blocking sales at one point in time the most was, I'd love to not use electricity during that time period, but I have no ability to do that, right? So that's either going to impact production, that's going to cost me, that's going to do these things. I don't have a battery, I don't have a generator, I don't have a thing that will allow me to not use electricity when it's really expensive. And we were like, yeah, okay, but if you got this $500,000 or $750,000 or whatever piece of equipment, whatever that is, you'd be able to save like a huge amount of money. And that thing would have a payoff period in many cases in 2 or 3 years. And it was like, this feels like no-brainer math. And the most common response to that part of the conversation was, we don't have capital budget. And we were like, okay, well, surely we should be able to help people get financing, quote unquote. How hard can that be? And so began a 3 or 4 year journey of ultimately building out a financing function at EnPowered to be able to figure out, how do we get somebody financing, under what circumstances, building out a network of a whole bunch of contractors in the equipment financing space so that we could, when somebody needed to get financing for that battery, that generator, solar panels, whatever, lighting, et cetera, we would then be able to service and support them. And I was the one who was responsible for doing funder operations, which was this function of collecting all the necessary information and sending it to our lending partners. And I was like, this is insane. This is absolutely insane. I can't believe I'm not doing this, right? Solving my own problem, so to speak. And so we started building our own internal tooling. And I turned to AI entirely out of necessity. That there was the reason that loan processors still very much have a job in 2025 is because every single company who's applying for financing is a snowflake. And they're, as much as you'd like to make it's a very standard template, and every funder has one. They call them needs lists or checklists. And they'll send you a list of, I need the following documents. And then you'll send them all of those documents and someone will review them. And they'll be like, oh, based on what we saw in here, we need 3 more documents. And then you can send those, and then based on what we saw now, we need 2 more documents, and the kind of list goes on. And so it was like, surely there's got to be a way to be able to get AI to apply some intelligence and some basic rules and some other pieces to be able to do that. So we built it for ourselves. We thought that would allow us to have an unfair advantage in the marketplace, get more deals, et cetera. But when we were talking to some of our lending partners, they were like, holy crap, that's super cool. Can we use that? And so began a shift that started officially in July of last year to to transition Arlo outside of EnPowered and into its own kind of spin-off to sell the software that we had built.
I really enjoy the story of journeys where you don't even think it's going to be a product, and then suddenly you've got something. That's super cool.
And we really didn't. In fact, Arlo, internally, we'd built another product sitting on top of Arlo to be able to provide estimates and other kind of financing related kind of functions on top of all of that. And we still have people who actively use that today, and they have no idea that underneath the sheets is this thing that collects documents and does all this other heavy lifting for lenders and brokers that is its own now kind of separate product. So it's kind of funny.
And one question I think that's on everybody's minds with a podcast like this is, Mike, are you an AI?
I am not an AI. Not yet. We're going to test that in Q2 to be, in all seriousness. We're going to use the Vidyard avatar technology to be able to see if that helps us convert a little bit on the sales side. We'll send essentially customized videos using my face and voice and likeness in Q2 as a test. Again, just as trying new things and seeing kind of what works. That's one of the fun things about building an AI product, is that it gives you a free pass to try AI things, right? And that your customers kind of expect that. That's, I think, also why my human BDR gets yelled at a little bit sometimes. But they expect it for you to use AI tools in comparison to, someone who has nothing to do with AI now starting to adopt AI. People are like, why are you changing? Why are you behaving differently? So we're trying to at least take advantage of some of the grace that we get for building AI tools to be able to do that.
That's actually kind of funny. I agree, though. If it's a big company that's well established and they start doing something that's not going to give them, I guess, the immediate returns, or if it doesn't feel polished, then you don't forgive them.
You don't give them as much grace, absolutely. And that's also just established company versus startup. Startups are expected and allowed to kind of try different things and be a little bit more risky. But I think it's also, humans in general don't love change, right? And so why are you changing? And if the answer is very clearly, like in the case of Klarna, they were like, no, not to pick on Klarna, but we think we can offer better support. It wasn't we can save a whole bunch of money. We think we can offer better support. Then that's a good reason to change, right? If the AI can remember exactly everything there is to know about your setup, how you work, what you do, all your past queries, everything in a way a human just can't, then there's an element of that, again, even staying up to date on all the product changes, et cetera. A lot of people don't really appreciate how hard customer support is. Right. And if you think you can build a better solution for the customers, then, I think they're willing to try it. If you're doing it purely to save money, that's a hard sell.
I actually just interviewed someone who is building AI for customer support. And what he's found is the previous generation technology, the dumb chatbots, they tend to make people angry. So they deflect tickets by losing customers.
Right.
So they make big claims and can't support them in terms of business value. But what he's doing is actually, it could be completely automated, but most people don't do it that way. They actually use it as a way to help the human agent. And I feel like that, to me, is an excellent way to use this new generation of AI technology. But I'd love to hear how, in your case with Arlo, are you replacing the job, or how does AI fit into that workflow of gathering all these documents?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. Every customer is a little bit different. So I have some of our customers are small, 1, 2, 3 kind of broker shop. And so for them, it's just replacing their own manual labor, right? And so they're very excited. So they don't have enough deal flow to hire somebody or to be able to do those things. And so from their perspective, it's not like taking a job away, but it's essentially, to your point, amplifying where they're going to spend their time, less time spent collecting documents, more time spent supporting their customers or, reaching out to new, lenders and kind of other partners. So I get that. The companies who sit on the bigger side, they break down in what we would expect in a very kind of specialized way. And so they may have a whole team of people that does a specific function. And especially if they collect a lot of that type of document, like I would say the most commonly collected document in Arlo today is a bank statement. So it's a very common ask. And so we've met some customers who have a team of people who just review bank statements and analyze them and, those types of things. And so when we have conversations with them, it's not about replacing the job. Again, it's more, oh my gosh, like we could take those 3 people who literally just review bank statements all day and we could go put them on this team where they can add more value and they can do other stuff. And to me, I have yet to see okay, this is going to take somebody's job. I suppose at some point it's plausible, but right now it really is much more like a suit of armor or, an exoskeleton or that kind of analogy than it is just purely throwing a robot into the field.
Actually, I like that analogy a lot as a mech warrior kind of gamer myself.
Yeah, exactly.
So it sounded like you shared a little bit of what got you to this point to build Arlo, but what got you into AI?
Yeah, it purely out of necessity. I had a problem and I went looking for a solution. I mean, obviously I'd been already using the tools like ChatGPT and those types of things to try and speed up some of the other stuff that was happening, but we really just turned to it as a way to be able to say, okay, well, could it solve this problem? And when we first tried it, it didn't. Partly that might have in retrospect been we also weren't as adept at using the tools, but the improvement in the foundational models over the past couple of years has made a pretty big difference. And then once it became possible, then it was like, okay, wow, like now let's start doing this. We started building some of our own models and experimenting, and it just very incremental. It wasn't like we went from we know nothing about AI to we're experts and that happened overnight. It was like, okay, here's all the mistakes we're running into. Here's all the problems. Here's all the challenges. Here's what everybody claims are best practices, and they turn out to not be best practices because the landscape is shifting. Like I remember meeting with somebody, one of the foundational model companies, and I was like, how much time do you spend on QA? What do you guys do? And how much time should I be spending on QA? And what their kind of rough barometer was, the value of testing with synthetic data versus real data, all of these different things. And now for so long, it was like all the value is going to accrue to the foundational models and all these like wrapper companies are going to be worth nothing. And now that narrative is kind of flipped on its head and there's no money to be made in foundational models, which I totally disagree with. And all the value is going to be in the wrapper companies, which is also not necessarily true. So life isn't that simple. It's a little bit more nuanced, but there's no question that there's value being created in multiple different areas and will continue to be created in multiple different areas. And not that dissimilar from the mobile revolution. The people who build the platforms are going to continue to move upstream to try and add more and more value. And that's going to come in the place of the application space. And the people who are building very straightforward horizontal use cases are likely to get cannibalized first and off it goes. But as someone who's building a software company on top of models, both our own and foundational models, there's actually feels like even more engineering work than on the Web 2 era or whatever, because there's just that element of randomness to how the models are going to respond. And I think it's really easy to get something to work 50% of the time, straightforward for the most part, to get it to work 80% of the time. It's a lot of engineering and a lot of effort to make sure that you've got something that's working in the high 90s, which again, if you were only good at 50% of the deals as a loan processor, you wouldn't have a job for very long. And so the AI is held to a very similar kind of standard.
You said a couple of things there that I want to follow up on, but just to wrap up the journey part of it, it sounds like it was this generation of technology that really pushed you to get into AI, and your journey has been keeping up with it. What would you add to that?
Yeah, no, I would agree very much. It definitely not sitting at the forefront, very much, more at that less to no research and more at that, how do you apply? And taking both things that might be happening in the research space and then, what you hear from others and trying to shoehorn them into your business to make your product better. So yeah, definitely there's certainly the sensation at many times of constantly feeling like there's a lot to do and we're very much behind.
Goodness, yes. I talked to a number of people who wonder whether they should go and get a PhD to get into AI, but I love hearing the stories of we took what was there and we used it.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't go down that path for a couple of reasons. And this might be obviously his personal bias. I think that the pace with which everything is moving your PhD could very well be irrelevant by the time you got to the other side, given how long they take, coupled with the fact that part of the benefit of a PhD is that it's extremely narrow and specialized. And so that's a bet, right? Like now you're making a very large bet. That specific thing that you picked is something that ultimately is going to be foundational for what's going to happen in the future. And man, that's a hard bet. I think a lot of people find AI really daunting. I think because the scope is so large, but it really isn't, right? There's more and more tools that are coming out that really try and, not dissimilar from tools like ours, that try and reduce a lot of the complexity so that someone else is handling that for you so that you can just focus on the things that add value. And I see that trend actually accelerating. And so when the thing that you're trying to do doesn't work, then you get to play, then you get to understand. And I think some of the most impactful learnings with AI is not how to get it to do what you want, but more so, why is it doing the thing you don't want it to do? And that becomes kind of some powerful skills and knowledge and everything to build on top of in understanding why it's behaving in those, again, 1, 2, whatever, 5% kind of cases in that way, to be like, I don't understand how you got here, and kind of reverse engineering the thinking. I find that to be the stuff where you get to really apply, and there's a lot of really good lessons in there. And that's what'll continue to differentiate our company in terms of value in comparison to people who take stuff off the shelf.
I love that. You said a couple of things about value that a company captures. And what's the differentiator for Arlo? What's the value that you're capturing as that part building on top of foundational models in that chain?
Yeah, so I strongly believe that you have to have domain knowledge to be able to apply AI into the domain. I'd rather be able to come from a place of experience to be like, okay, well, this is the job, this is how it works, this is how it works without AI. Now, how do we augment it, change it, modify it, enhance it, whatever kind of perspective or phrasing you want to use using AI. It's important to have enough knowledge of the domain, but not so much that you're like, no, this is how it's always been done. It's there, a little bit of a balance there, as it's always been when we talk about using technology in general. But I think it's really hard to be able to just take those tools and then just apply them to a domain without having any knowledge or experience with how people do the work in that. I find that people who are in it day to day, they just, in much the same way that classically you would have done it in the same challenges when it was like, hey, we're going to mobile. Great, we take our desktop application and we just jam it onto a mobile device. That's a horrible experience. Like this thing is now it's a touch screen, right? It might have been something even less adaptable at the time, like a rollerball or whatever. And you're just like, man, this is horrible on mobile. And so it's really the same thing where we have to rethink from first principles. And when I look at some of our competitors who are already in the space but haven't taken advantage of AI, it's because their user interface doesn't allow for it. It would break how they've designed their product. And so very similar to, again, previous technology shifts, if you were doing location as a critical component, if you were location first from the beginning, it took a very different approach than somebody who bolted it on afterwards. AI is very similar, as you take a very different approach from the beginning. And it makes you rethink everything, right? It's like, okay, well, why am I asking them any questions if all I need them to do is upload a document and I can get all the answers from the document? And if I can't, why can't I? What document am I missing, right? And so you really have to think about it differently.
So it sounds like you're not a loan processor by background. So how did you get that expertise in the domain and marry that with AI?
Yeah, because we essentially built our own financing arm. We were trying to finance deals for customers that we had or potential customers, and then through our partner network. And so we got to learn on the fly. And so it's literally like, I remember sitting down and it was like one of the lenders that we worked with wrote back and is like, none of your stuff makes any sense. And I was like, great, can we jump on a call and you can explain why none of it makes any sense so that we can make it make sense? And even today, ironically enough, the format of the data room is very much in part due to a conversation with that wonderful person. So no plan survives contact with the market. It's the same on the product side. We don't know what you don't know, but we sat in the trenches for 3 years, essentially doing a lot of these deals. and seeing how they worked and didn't work and where they broke and which ones got funded and which ones didn't and why and all of that stuff. And it's a very humbling experience for sure at times, but it turned out to provide really great insights into how to use AI in a market that needed some help.
And how did you start with the AI first mindset in that case?
So I think the biggest differentiator for us is that if you look at document collection solutions that exist, and there are many in the market, they come with a predefined template of here's all the different files that I need. And then all of that is then up to the borrowers. Here's the slot for driver's license. You click a button beside the driver's license, you upload the driver's license, it goes in, checks it off, and then off it goes down the list. It's very tedious on part of the borrower for sure, but it still then leaves at the end the actual loan processor to go and open up the thing that is the driver's license, to confirm it's a driver's license, to confirm that it's still valid, and all these other types of things. And so we said, don't make people do that. Just literally have a list and have a gigantic box where they just dump all of the documents and then make the AI do all of the heavy lifting. If you give me something I wasn't looking for, that's great. I'll keep it, I'll label it, I'll look after it. I know exactly what it is. And I'll just automatically just check things off on the list for you. And just, again, like it sounds like such a simple change. And sure, in retrospect now, after 7 different iterations of the UI to kind of get ourselves there, it was just constantly looking at what's that point of friction, what's stopping them, why aren't they interested, what kind of pain points are they getting, and then narrowing down to, like literally just let them drop files. And it goes beyond that, right? Humans are fascinating, right? And that they, even like humans as programmers, right? Or people building products, they're like, we're going to let the AI do this. And then everything else is going to be programmed around it, right? We want control. We want to know that the things we're going to do and so on. And it takes a certain amount of courage to go, no, we're going to trust the AI to ask the right questions. We're going to trust the AI to do the things around all of that. And how do we build the product in a way that it's intelligent enough to be able to do that well and doesn't fall down with failure and everything else. So like I get on demos, Daniel, and I don't know what the AI is going to say, right? Even though I'm using the same files every time and so on, the world is changing. And so it's something that gets smarter, and it's, hey, these things don't match. Why don't they match? And the questions are, slightly different every time. And there's that humans don't like that level of unpredictability. Right. So,
No.
But I think that's, again, where that takes a little bit of courage.
Yeah, that's actually fascinating. You said there's a list of something that has to be checked off, and it sounds like that list isn't the list of documents anymore. So what is it?
It is the list of documents. It's traditionally known as a needs list or a checklist of documents that they need. But Arlo is now smart enough to be like, okay, I need this, but I need this because it contains information that I need. And if you give it to me in a format that isn't helpful, I'm now smart enough to be like, hey, that didn't solve my problem. Right. And so like obvious answers are, there's different levels of financial statements. We've heard of audited financial statements. The other end of that is an internal financial statement that's never been seen outside of that. Some of the lenders, for the right reasons, don't accept internal statements because they need some sort of corroboration. And so the most common corroboration in the US market, Canada's a little bit different, is that they'll ask for tax returns to go with those. Because then it's like, okay, well, if you filed this stuff on your tax return with the government, then it's probably true that the internal statement, if it matches, is the same. And so again, getting the AI to automatically detect that it's an internal statement and saying, okay, I'm going to actually need tax returns to go with that. It met the requirement of an internal statement. It checked it off, but it didn't meet the needs of the lender. And that's the difference. And like when we talk about adding value in some of these different pieces, that's what I'm referring to. It's that thoughtfulness but it didn't actually solve the problem we were trying to solve. Right. Yeah. And so if someone uploads a driver's license, it's not that I need the driver's license. I'm actually looking for identification. If you upload a passport, then there's a high probability that actually solves the same problem. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's having some intelligence around what the purpose of the different documents are and why they're being asked. And again, that's different for every company, right? So they have some slight differences in terms of expectations and requirements, and they're running their own balance, right? If you with some lenders who are very onerous and have very strong requirements and very clear, and they don't want to see deals that don't meet that and so on. And then we have others who are like, nah, just let them through. Like whatever they got is great and we'll figure it out from there, because they don't want the friction as part of the process to inevitably kind of wreck their deal. And, you have people who move an immense amount of volume of deals in a month, for example, and then others who move a very small fraction of that, but would consider their differentiator to be, you get white glove service, you've got a phone to call, you're not just a number. So again, everybody has a different approach in go-to-market, and we try to adapt Arlo to match as much as possible.
Yeah, it sounds like that there's a mindset shift in there from the traditional, let's call it Web 2.0 interface of here's a list of documents, upload the documents, to I actually know what I'm looking for. Let me make sure that you've given me what I'm looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, even that conversation of what do you actually use this document for becomes an important part of that process as well, right? What do you do with this when you get it? What are you checking for? Becomes an important part of just even rethinking some of their own processes as to, do we still actually need this? Is this as valuable as it used to be? And so on.
Oh, that actually is fascinating too, because that means it's not just the AI that's changing, it's your relationship to the customer, your customer, Arlo's customer, that is changing. And then they might even change their internal processes by saying,
100%.
we've never asked this question before. Do we really need this document? And what are we actually looking for?
Well, and we used to in the past, right? Like, and that's also the rise of online databases to contain information, right? So one of the common documents to ask for is articles of organization, or in Canada, we would call them articles of incorporation, essentially like business registry documents, right? Well, in the United States, the Secretary of State exists in all 50 states, and all businesses are required in those states to be registered. In Canada, we have 4 open registries. The rest are all closed, but you can go look up companies in those registries. You can see when they were incorporated. You can see the status of their incorporation. Are they still valid and active and everything else? So why are you asking for my articles of organization if I'm very clearly under this name sitting in the registry within the province of Ontario or within the state of Massachusetts or whatever the case might be? And then it was like, okay, I want to know who their agent was that registered them. Great. We can look that up. That's in the database, right? And so it's okay. Maybe we don't need that document anymore. Or we do if they change stuff, right? So if they're filling out the process and they're saying their address is different than what's in the registry, now I want to see it. And so it's this type of thinking of just even asking, what do you do with a document once you get it? That can be quite helpful.
And some of that sounds like it doesn't require AI at all. But you also mentioned that part of the mindset shift was taking AI from a small box and letting it have a larger box to play in. Could you describe that process a little more?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So we have different types of models that are available in the market. So if we just look at foundational models, we have your kind of high pre-train and low inference models, like the way I like to think about it. 4.0 from OpenAI would be probably the top one right now. We can have a fight of whether that's Anthropic or whatever, but like that type of model, they don't use a lot of inference. They're heavily pre-trained. And so that type of model is good for a certain set of things, asking very, what I'll call simple questions. The best analogy that I've come up with when I talk to other people is it's like hiring a high school co-op student. They're intelligent, they can learn, they can do all these things. And if you teach them properly and you break it down into very simple steps, they can give you what you're looking for. There's the chain of thought models that exist now, O3 Mini being OpenAI's largest, DeepSeek R1 being theirs, and so on. And they take a very different approach where it's less about pre-training. I don't know, it's still obviously pre-trained, but more about how do we effectively spend inference time coming up with answers. And before those existed, if you asked more questions that required more thought, it took a lot of effort to get the high school student up to a level to be like, hey, you've got 10 or 15 years of experience in this job and you know what to do and how to do it. And so a lot of our ability to be able to do that has now shifted because we can ask more thoughtful questions, because we're able to use more inference. And then we run into trade-offs of the amount of time that can take and the user experience involved in that part of the process. And then how do we hide some of those time delays and everything else? But asking the AI to do more was also premised on the ability for the AI to do more.
And what does that look like with what you built?
Yeah. So in our case, we break down our process into 4 different stages. So the first step is we identify a document. What is this thing? Is it a financial statement, a driver's license, et cetera? The second thing we do once we know what it is we extract the information out of the document as much as possible so that, say, if it's a driver's license, I know your eye color, your hair color, your height, and birth date and expiry date and all those different things. And then the third thing we do is we validate. And so validation in that context is done only in the ability to validate an individual document. The easiest example is a driver's license. Is a driver's license expired or not? Okay, that's a simple validation check we can do on a driver's license. On, financial statements, it might be the level of the financial statement, be like, hey, this doesn't pass validation because it's internal only or whatever. And you can typically flag some specific things inside documents that just don't necessarily make sense in certain cases. Like if you pass me articles of organization and, it somehow magically doesn't have a name, then it's okay, this is like likely to be fake. What are the chances that the corporation name is missing? Those types of things. But other stuff, the document itself might be fine, but the deal itself doesn't make sense. And the fourth stage is that we call verification. And that's where you take all of the context of all of the pieces within the deal, and then you make sure that they make sense. So, great example would be of things that the AI is actually really quite good at catching that humans aren't great at catching, is that the bank statement number used on the void check that was provided doesn't match the bank statement number that's on the actual bank statement itself. No human looks at that, right? They're not like, here's a 9-digit number or 10-digit number, and we're checking to make sure that they're the same. And so the AI is, when it detects those scenarios and asks like, hey, this account number on this this void check is this, and the account number on this bank statement is this, why? Usually does a pretty good job at throwing humans off to be like, wow, I never would have thought of that. And so that verification step looks literally at all of the components and how they fit together, and then asks additional contextual questions based off that, or has the ability to ask for more documents. So again, that we talked earlier about, hey, the human, when the loan processor looks at this and says, okay, based on what you shared with me, I now need these 3 additional documents. It's now starting to get better at asking for more documents. But there's a balance, in much the same way that we don't want to introduce friction. Like in a perfect world, again, do you actually need that document? Is still a very valid filter on whether or not the AI should be asking.
And you mentioned the experience of going into a demo call and not knowing what the AI would say. How does that fit into giving the AI more room to play with?
Yeah. So a great example is my demo set is mean to the AI intentionally. I've got a fake driver's license from the state of California that expired in 2014. And the name of the person is literally, I'm a card holder. So it's like very fake. The void check that we pulled off of Google is from John Smith at a fake bank that doesn't exist. The bank statements, there's 3 bank statements that correspond to John Smith's personal bank, and 3 bank statements that correspond to the fake. It's actually not a fake company. It turns out to be a very real company, but I didn't know that until I built all the documents, called Acme Corporation. And then financials for Acme Corporation that show some pretty significant net losses over the last couple of years, but they're trending in the right direction. We've got a personal financial statement under my name that's a sample that sits inside the data room as well. And so the AI is trying to make sense of all this stuff. And depending on kind of, what it thinks at the time is the most pressing thing, sometimes we see questions to be like, hey, the void check account number doesn't match the bank statement number for John Smith. Other times it's like, who is John Smith and how is he related to Acme Corporation? Because he's not on any of the article documents. He's not an agent. He's none of the people that's involved. He's not the person applying for financing. Why are you giving me his check? Why are you giving me his bank account statements, right? Sometimes we'll get questions around the business and its trajectory, in that you have actually a lot of capital that's sitting in your bank account, but you have loans. Why are you not paying those down? You've increased the amount of debt that you've got, but you've also increased cash on hand. Why? So it varies largely in that it's still learning as to which questions are really good. And so in a demo, like I can And we try and limit it to 3 or 4 just so that it's not overwhelming for the borrower. We find in certain scenarios, like I can probably guess 2 of the 3 that are going to show up like pretty with regularity, but one tends to kind of move around a little bit.
That's quite funny. But I can see that being nerve-wracking going into a demo and saying the AI is coming up with these questions, so I can't tell you everything that's going to come out.
Yeah. And it's the number one thing that my customers keep asking for right now is that they really want to control those. They want to control those follow-up questions because, again, it's that value experience. They don't want their borrower to come through and have a bad experience. And so being asked a stupid question definitely counts as a bad experience. And with certainly I don't want to say learned some of those lessons the hard way. I mean, it doesn't take rocket science to figure out that we shouldn't ask stupid questions, but that's back to my original point of like courage. If you don't know exactly what it's going to ask until you see all of the data, how do you continue to improve the quality of the questions that it's going to ask? And that's a non-trivial problem.
Absolutely, yeah. Then what do you see as the right approach to fixing that?
Yeah, it's going to be a combination of essentially reinforcement learning, and that was a dumb question or that wasn't a dumb question, and making sure that the UI allows you to essentially kind of skip past that or provide some indication that was a stupid question. But in general, we also spend a fair bit of time just watching our users as the actual borrower themselves go through. And that's a big difference. Like in a sense, we have the person who buys it isn't necessarily the person who uses it. We'll obviously have a number of our lenders who are in the product on a regular basis using their portion of it, but they're passing it off to their borrowers to complete it. And so it's incumbent on us to make sure that we're not just watching how our lenders use it and making sure that they enjoy it, but making sure that their borrowers have a successful experience as well.
Yeah, it feels to me like this generation of product with AI in it requires a lot more attention than Web 2.0.
The way you have to test is just completely different than the way that you tested just a standard web or mobile app, right? Here's all the permutations of movements and, data structures and so on that we could have. And here's the most common ones. And let's make sure in our kind of smoke test before we release something that all works and blah, blah, blah. And that's just so woefully inadequate when it comes to AI, because it's, you make a change to something and it might work for, really well for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60% of the kind of data blocks that it'll see. But if it doesn't work well for 40%, then that's clearly not okay. And so you need to have more visibility and thoughtfulness into the different kind of variations of things that you've seen. And that's where having access to previous runs of data from customers and all these other pieces becomes an increasing kind of advantage for companies to make sure that both the quality of the experience and the quality of the AI solution is much better on their platform than on others.
And what do you see as the future of AI?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think there's a variety of different ways to take that. I'm not convinced that the approach that we're taking with LLMs will get us to, artificial general intelligence or super intelligence. I think that the technology, this type of technology that we've built and are building on top of, is going to replicate large parts of intelligence in the way that we think about it, but can it be applied generally? There's still, again, even if we just take our solution, there's still a lot of training or teaching or whatever that needs to be done to get it to do the things. I think the concerns about job losses, I think they're a bit overblown. And I get it. I get the anxiety around that, right? I mean, you watch a video and someone pulls together an application in 3 minutes and you're like, why does anybody even hire a software developer anymore? And then you realize that as soon as that thing breaks, someone has to be able to fix it. That's why we still have software developers. And so I think everybody can and should be changing how they work. And I think that's going to be a lot of the heavy lifting over the next 2, 5, whatever number of years, as new tools and technologies on other pieces come out and humans adapt to using them. But that you're still going to have inherent knowledge or skill, because there's only so much that you can say, can you try again? Can you try again? Before you just stop and be like, okay, it's clear that the AI is not going to figure this out and I'm going to have to find another way. to do it myself. And again, like I said earlier in our discussion, that's a big part of the learning is where does it fall down and why is it falling down, so that you know the limits of what it's capable of.
And I think that goes back to your point too, that marrying AI with domain expertise is where the magic happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Mike. And I just wanted to give you a few minutes if you want to share anything that you'd like to share or how we can connect with you.
Yeah, it's easy to find me. I'm on X at Mike Kirkup, LinkedIn as well. Happy to use both of those platforms. Also, obviously, check out our website. For Arlo, I use arlo.com. If you're at all remotely interested in AI document collection, I'm happy to have that conversation. I've learned a ton. And I very much enjoyed the conversation today. It was enlightening, even piecing together some of the different things that one thinks about but doesn't necessarily articulate out loud all the time. Thank you very much for your time and attention today.
I started this podcast because I wanted to stand at the gate of businesses using AI and see what separated hype from lasting impact. Back when cities had walls, you had to go into the city to do business at the market. So, if you wanted to talk to someone, you waited by the gate until they came in or came out. Do that enough times and you could talk to everyone. That's what I want to do. Stand at the gate of people doing business with AI and talk to them, see what they do and why they do it. If you know someone that's making an impact in the world of AI, would you connect them with me? You can find me on LinkedIn or shoot me an email at daniel@manary.house. That's Daniel@MANARY.HAUS. Thanks for listening.